You might know this because you are a psychiatrist. How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb?
One?
Exactly. One, but the light bulb has to really want to change.
That joke.
We all want to live a happy life, of course. In fact, we want it so much that there's a whole cottage industry built around helping us find it. But what does a happy life actually look like? In the 1930s, some Harvard scientists started tracking 724 teenagers. They kept detailed records about how they lived their lives and what gave them satisfaction. They tracked all 724 people for their entire lives. Only 10 of them are still living today, and they are all in their hundreds. But just like the people the study tracked, the scientists got old too. So the director of the study was handed to subsequent generations. And Dr. Robert Waldinger is the current director, a position he's held for the past 22 years, so he knows a lot about what actually leads to a happy life. I wanted to know the things he's learning. I also wanted to know how he's changed his own life as a result of the data he reads. And let's just say I'm making a few changes to how I live my life too. This is a bit of optimism. I don't know how to ask this without it sounding not polite, but it's the only way I can. It's the only way I can think to ask it. How come they picked you to lead the happiness study?
Well, you're not the only one who asked that question. I asked that question.
Did you draw the short straw?
You know, I might have drawn the short straw. What happened was my predecessor, George Valiant, asked a couple of other people, and they said no. They said, this is a great, big, messy albatross with data that goes back to 1938. So he got turned down.
So he proudly got his third choice.
I think I was at least his third choice.
So what made you say yes? Let's go there then.
Oh, well, so the research project that I begged them to fund, the federal government said, nah, we're not so interested. So I was in that place. And my predecessor said, come over to my office and just read through one person's file. Mm-hmm. And so I said, okay, the file was probably 1,000 pieces of paper. Wow. And I started reading through, and I read about this 19-year-old guy and what he hoped for his life and what was most important to him and what it was like to be dating. And then I read about his 40-year-old aspirations. And then I flipped to his 60-year-old discussion of his marriage and how disappointing it was.
You read his whole life.
I read his life. I sat there and read his life. And it was like, this is like the coolest thing I could do.
Based on the actual people you studied, tell me something they get right as they are young kids in their teens or even in their early 20s, and they start to think about what will make them happy, and they get it right.
A lot of them care about making a difference in the world, and they care about the world. And the people, I think, who stay with that, they may not be the same purpose all the way through their lives, sure, but the people who stay with that aspiration, I think, stay engaged in life. And I think that's what they get right.
That's really significant, right? Because if we look at how we're teaching our children, universities advertise as a reason to choose them over another the starting salaries of their graduates.
Yeah.
And our guidance counselors, they don't ask us the right questions about how we want to contribute to the world. They ask us what we can do and where we think we can get employment. And so what I find very significant about what you're saying is, what if our guidance counselors, what if our deans, what if our parents start instilling in us at a very young age the importance of simply wanting to be a part of something bigger than ourselves? Forget about actually achieving it, simply wanting it.
Yeah, right.
That, as you said, the data shows that people who at a young age want to contribute to something bigger themselves, they will somehow pursue that ideal for the rest of their lives, which keeps them at above average happy rates.
Yes. And I think what happens is that many people have posited a kind of psychological maturity that involves wanting to be part of something bigger than the self. Yeah. Erik Erikson, I don't know if you've heard of his stuff, but he
The
was
Viking?
yeah. No. He was a psychoanalyst from Vienna in the 30s and 40s who came to Boston, who taught for a while at Harvard, and he started talking about the stages of adult development. Nobody had talked about adult development. Everybody was interested in kids because they so obviously develop.
Right.
But he said, adults go through these stages, and one of his stages he called generativity versus stagnation. And the generativity was wanting to be part of something bigger than yourself, realizing, oh, I want to help raise kids, or I want to mentor people, or I want to do something that's not just me. And he said that the people who do that become the people who are going to look back on their lives with less regret, with more of a sense that my life was good enough.
I think we're living in a time where, though we intellectually know that because it's the subject of so many social media posts, I think we're living in a time where people don't feel connected to something bigger than themselves in general. We don't work for companies for 30 or 40 years anymore. Church attendance is down.
Right.
Even the great power competitions of us versus the Soviet Union that we were proud to be a part of, this side versus that side, like even at a global politics level, like those things have gone away. And I think you see it on the left and the right politically, people latching onto absolutely anything that gives them that sense of belonging, but it doesn't last. Those attachments don't last, but you can see them just grasping for it.
Yeah.
In a way that maybe I'm idealizing, but I don't have memory of people doing in the past. The sort of the intense latching onto, whether it's a far left or a far right point of view about how the world should work. And they latch onto it as if it's their life's purpose, but it isn't.
Right.
It lasts for a period of time and then on to the next, or it dissipates.
Right. Or an identity as a certain kind of influencer, or an identity as a person living a certain style of life materially. I mean, there are all these various identities that people are struggling for. I think you're right. Robert Putnam is a political scientist. He wrote a book called Bowling Alone. Yeah, right. So you know about this. So he tracked how we've stopped belonging, right? Yeah. We've stopped all the things you just said, and we've stopped joining clubs and volunteering and having people over to our houses. And what he's found is that it's gotten worse since the digital revolution. Yeah. The digital revolution has accelerated the trends that were already there. Yeah. And so the path of least resistance now is social isolation, greater and greater isolation. And we're all kind of desperate for what to do about it and how to feel like we belong.
I wonder if we need a new word. And I'll tell you what I mean. Because the technology has co-opted words, right? So a desktop used to be a horizontal surface.
Yeah.
And now a desktop is a vertical surface.
Yeah.
And a folder was something you used to put away in alphabetical order. And now a folder is something you click on.
Absolutely.
It's taken words and things to make the transition to living in a digital world. I know why they do it. It's because it's easier. But the word community used to mean like showing up and wearing a fez, and there were secret handshakes, and there was a time to meet up, and there was free food, and community meant a thing. And now that word has been co-opted to like being on an email list.
Exactly.
Now what you and I are talking about, we're attempting to offer an archaic definition of what community is. And I wonder if instead of trying to fight it, we just need a new word. And then people will want to think that's the new word because community already belongs online.
But I worry that the word we're substituting is something like tribe. And tribe has all those connotations of who we exclude, who we make other, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think we're all stuck in this place where we don't know how to belong without making other people enemies.
Yeah. I want to scratch this just a little bit more because when I articulated the concept of why, the reason I called it the why was a semantic problem that I faced, right? Which is I got tired of debating with people what comes first, vision or mission. And the debate would go on forever.
Yeah.
And so I finally realized we were having a semantic debate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I asked the people who believed vision was preeminent, what is the definition of vision to you? And they said, it's why I get out of bed in the morning. And I went to people who believed mission was preeminent. And I said, what's mission to you? And they said, well, it's why I do what I do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so everybody, whether it was purpose or brand or whatever word they thought was the thing, they all gave me the same definition. And so I said, okay, so let's call it the why. And now we can all agree what it is. And now we can actually figure out how to do it rather than debate what comes first.
Right. Right. Exactly.
And so I wonder how people are defining community. And maybe you have some data that explains that. Like, it's one thing to say, I want my life to be a part of something bigger than itself. I want to feel a sense of purpose. But what actually, based on this longitudinal study, what actually do people mean when they say these words?
The people who talked about it the most meant something quite fluid and quite individual. So the people who were the best at this would have like workmates over for barbecues, but they'd mix in their family, they'd mix in cousins, and they'd mix in people from their church, and they'd introduce each other. And so you have these people who become like the nodes of a group of people that get connected. They become, if you will, connectors. Yeah. But that means that each person might be the node of a unique collection of people, right? As opposed to one thing, going to a church, going to a synagogue. Yeah, you can do that, and that is a defined community. But most of us have these things that are more fluid and individual. Yeah. One of my friends who's the best at this keeps connecting his friends from random parts of his life. And it's really fun to get to be part of that group of people because it's so diverse.
I think you're touching on something that I think is really magical. If we're saying it's important for us to build community, and I've done this, I've gone to dinner parties and it's the same 10 people at just a different house.
Yeah.
You know? And they say we care about community, but as you're defining it, it's not really community. It's just the same 10 people at different houses. And I think what you're talking about is the importance of the salon, the old school salon, which is, instead of hosting a dinner party, we should take it upon ourselves to build salons, which is, I'm going to invite some tried and true friends. I'm going to invite some people who I just met recently. I'm going to invite somebody who I met at a different dinner party. And I may or may not give a subject to discuss at the table, but this is what's going to happen. Because then I'll go to somebody else's dinner party who was at mine, and it's a lot of new people for me too. Yeah. And I love this idea of us not just hosting dinner party for the people we know, but for specifically hosting dinner parties for people we know that our friends don't know.
Exactly. Because the same 10 people is in a silo, right? Yeah. Like it's almost, it could be hermetically sealed. And so you know what each other thinks, you know each other. But the most exciting conversations happen for me when people come who do completely different things, who come from different backgrounds. I mean, today I was on a call with a researcher who was growing nerve cells from schizophrenics. And he's trying to see, is a nerve cell different in how it makes connections if it's got the genes of someone with schizophrenia and therefore someone who has delusions? Do the connections that a nerve cell make, are they different for people with delusions? And I'm like buzzing with all these ideas. And it's because a student of mine is also a student of his and brought us together. Yeah. And our heads started to explode with excited possibilities.
And I think what you're talking about is we connect not on the interest. That stuff is superficial and that stuff is good at, sort of getting people in the room.
Yeah.
But we're talking about deep, deep values that are deeper than our political points of view, because I can have the same values as somebody with a different political point of view than me. And I think people confuse those things sometimes. I love this. So how long have you led how long have you been the boss of the study?
22 years.
22 years. And what did you learn from the data that you've been able to apply to your life that has made you happier?
I now
you were reading some data and you're like, I'm going to start doing that. And you did.
I now call up my guy friends and I say, let's go for a walk. Let's go out to dinner. We're not just going to wait for our wives to do this thing, to organize our social lives. We're going to do this. And at first it's really awkward. Like, we don't do this. We're guys. And then it's been a wonderful thing in terms of really getting to know individually people who were otherwise part of a social group, part of the same 10 people, if you will.
Yeah.
But we never dug more deeply into knowing each other. And so it made me do that, because I thought, otherwise, I'm just going to sit here on my computer all day long, doing my research stuff, doing my academic stuff, and pick my head up and have no friends.
That's a really good one.
Yep. Somebody said, take care of your body like you're going to need it for 100 years. And I realized that, boy, this really, really matters, that in our data, the people who took care of themselves, so we're talking regular exercise, not abusing drugs and alcohol, not becoming obese, all that stuff, they lived on average 10 years longer and stayed healthier. So even though it's not rocket science and it's not news, I could see in my own data how much it really matters.
People, I assume, are starting to die now in the studies.
Most of the original folks have died. 724 original people.
Right.
Fewer than 10 are still alive, and they're all over age 100.
Okay, so of the ones, of those 724, the ones who lived the longest, because biohacking is a thing now, and like there's an obsession with longevity. And so the people who lived the longest, was there a pattern that you were able to discern? And the people who lived the shortest, was there a pattern that you were able to discern?
Yeah. The longest was literally taking care of your physical health and being really socially engaged in the world. Okay. Those were the two things. Yeah. And the people who lived the shortest, it was the opposite. People who became alcoholics, who became obese, who didn't take care of themselves, and who were isolated.
This is why I think your work is very, very important, is because I think a lot of the longevity people and biohackers and all of that, they're all talking about vitamins and exercise, and sure, that stuff's great. And they pay lip service to community, whereas they're giving exact dosages of vitamin D that I should be taking on a daily basis, but nobody's giving me a prescription to how to hang out with my friends.
Because community doesn't make money. You can sell vitamin D. You can sell supplements. You can package them in fancy ways. You can sell them on a podcast, right?
I appreciate the cynicism so much. You have no idea.
I'm so sorry.
I think you're 100% right. I think you're 100% right. There is a financial incentive to sell half a solution.
Exactly. And what I struggle with, so as you know, I'm a physician, I'm a psychiatrist, and one of the difficulties with medicine is that the vast amount of disease is preventable, but you don't make money in medicine preventing disease. You make money curing disease or trying to ameliorate disease with medications, with procedures. You don't make money preventing disease by encouraging people to socialize, by encouraging people to exercise.
You've been doing this for 22 years. Do you get tired talking about it?
Yeah. Actually, no. I mean, okay, I don't get.
Because you're getting the same question. Like, you could do a bunch of you're going to have to answer the same questions 5 times in a row.
Yeah, but how they get asked is so different. I mean, talking with you right now is really fun, right? Because of the way we're talking. No, but really, because there's a real back and forth, right? We're having a conversation. There are other times when it's like, just shoot me. If someone says, I'm really looking forward to reading your book. Can you explain to our listeners what you do? That's like fingernails on a blackboard.
The interviews that I hate doing is where the people are so over-prepared to talk to me that they ask me questions about my book. Like, Simon, what are the 5 elements of the infinite game? And I was like, well, you know the answer. You say it. Like, why you ask me questions you know the answers to? Ask me questions you don't know the answers to. That's more fun.
Absolutely. And so when something spontaneous happens, like is happening now with you, I could do this forever. But when the other happens, I just want to be done.
So I have to. I mean, you might know this because you are a psychiatrist. How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb?
One?
Exactly. One, but the light bulb has to really want to change.
I love that joke. I love that joke.
What was your journey? How did you get into psychiatry? Like, why, when you decided you want to go to med school, why the mind?
Well, when I decided to go to med school, it wasn't going to be the mind. I'm a Jewish kid from Des Moines, Iowa. I did not know
You're
any.
the Jewish kid from Des Moines, Iowa.
Well, close. No. We had about 1,000 Jewish families in Des Moines. We had 3.5 synagogues.
Wow.
But yeah. But so most of the psychiatrists I knew worked with seriously mentally ill people in asylums. And psychotherapy was not a thing you did in Des Moines unless you were really ill and needed to be in a hospital. So I didn't know anybody, but I knew I really liked working with people. And so when I got to med school, I realized that psychiatry was like by far the thing that excited me the most. But psychiatry is the stepchild of medicine. So a lot of my professors said, you know, either you're at the bottom of the class or you yourself are crazy, because there'd be no other reason for you to go into psychiatry. So it took me a long time before I finally admitted, like, who am I kidding? This is really the most interesting thing. Because otherwise it was memorizing the 12 types of thyroid tumors. And I didn't care about thyroid tumors unless somebody I knew had one. But I cared deeply about the mind, and especially how my own worked. So I had to come around to it, despite the stigma of being a psychiatrist.
How did you get over the stigma? Because there's a lot of pressure to become an accountant or choose the line of medicine that's most in demand right now because it's a better business option. You followed passion.
I did. Well, partly I followed passion because I'm not good at doing things I'm not passionate about. Actually, all my energy drains and I start to shut down and I start to feel terrible. And I started to do that. I realized I don't care about most of medicine. So yes, I could become a cardiologist like many of my aunts and uncles wanted me to do, because cardiology is a nice field, right? But I realized I would just die. I would just wither on the vine. And what I've finally learned to do over time is to listen to that gut that says, I'm drawn to this and I'm not drawn to that. That's probably the hardest lesson I've had to keep learning throughout my life.
So, good segue. If we look at the world as it is now, it seems that younger people who are trying to figure out what to do with their lives, their quote unquote passion for something seems to be, I don't know if it's driven by external reward structure. You know, the number of young people who say, I want to be an influencer. It's like people who come up to me and say, Simon, can I get your advice? I'd love to be a speaker. I'm like, oh, amazing. Or I want to be an author. I'm like, great. What do you want to speak about? They're like, I don't know yet. I'm like, well, then, no, you got it in the wrong order. Like, I want to be an influencer. Influencer is a mechanism to spread something, but what is the thing you're passionate about to spread?
Exactly.
That the thing that they think they're passionate for is something that looks cool, sounds cool, gets a lot of adoration, gets a lot of money, gets a lot of fame. And it's an age-old question. How do I know what I'm passionate for?
For me, it literally has been learning to tap into my energy. Is my energy higher or lower in this moment than it was a few minutes ago? Literally. And I had to learn that. For example, I'm really enjoying this conversation. My energy's higher. And if I'm in a conversation where it starts to lower, I get it right away. And one of the things I've come to understand is that we get trained to ignore those signals. I was, at least. Think about all the times you had to sit in a classroom in school and you'd have these urges to do something or explore something. But of course you had to sit still and watch the clock until the class was over. We've been taught to suppress these inner voices, I think, since we were in preschool.
I think you're right, but there's a nuance here that's very important, and I need you to unwrap it for me, which is we evaluate friends. Like, are our friends generative? You know, unbalanced, not every time, because sometimes we're tired, sometimes they're tired, but in general, when I hang out with X friend versus Y friend, is that friend generative in how I feel? Do I leave my time with them happier, elated, as you said, like up, right?
Yeah.
And am I paying attention to that I want to spend more time with them versus, well, we've been friends for 15 years, so I guess I'll go out with them, you know?
Exactly.
And I think that's true with our work as well. And it obviously conflicts with things like responsibility, because sometimes you have to suppress that feeling because I have to be responsible. It's an imperfect standard.
Right.
Uh,
I don't always feel like changing that diaper.
Right, exactly. I think you're touching upon it, which is folks like us are giving advice like trust your gut, follow that elation. But the problem is that I don't know if people are running towards it, or when they don't feel it, they rebel against it. So in a work environment, right, we see this a lot where it's particularly young people, but not exclusively. They just have more courage, I think, which is if they're in a job that doesn't do that, they're very vocal and sometimes rejecting of the culture, the leader, the boss, the job itself. And I think there's more about speaking out against the fact that I'm not elated, thinking that by speaking out against it, I will find the elation, rather than doing more of the thing that elates me, like going to work and saying, hey, my boss, this elates me in general. This elates me less in general. Can I do more of that, please? Rather than rejecting, throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Absolutely. There's more of a need to take responsibility for that, right? To have a sense of agency. Okay, if this job is draining as it is, what can I do, right? What can I do? And some of that, as you know, has to do with connecting with people on the job. Like one of the things we know is that if people have friends on the job, if they have people they want to show up for, that in and of itself is energizing, even if you're making widgets in a way that's boring to you.
Yeah. We're creating a problem here. Do you realize that? Which is because we're saying, don't run away from, run towards. Run towards a feeling, run towards the contribution to something bigger. And yet, I think people, if they're listening, will say, I think I'm running away more often than I'm running towards. I'm running away from relationships rather than towards new ones. I'm running away from a job I hate rather than one toward the one that I think I'm going to love. So now it begs the question, how do I know what to run towards?
Okay, I have an example coming to mind. I loved doing theater as a high school kid, as a college kid. And if I just ran toward what I loved, I would be a failed actor today. So what I had to do was really take in the whole picture to realize, okay, I love theater. I still love theater. But the whole picture was I came to understand that doing theater involved a lot of rejection. It involved getting bad reviews of plays sometimes in college. It involved getting turned down for parts. It involved feeling like I was acting with people who I didn't think were any fun to be with, all that, right? And what I had to do was take in the larger picture, not just the isolated passion that I was looking at, right? And so some of this is a kind of discernment where you say, okay, what goes with the whole package? If we go back to psychiatry, what I found was that psychiatry has a whole package. It's one of the lowest paid specialties in medicine, but it's got one of the best lifestyles. On the other hand, cardiology is way better paid, but I don't like doing it. So there's a kind of discernment that's required for what do I run toward? What do I hang back from or walk away from? But the challenge is to take it all in, not just to say, okay, I'm going to focus on this one tiny part of it.
So you're asking people to do a cost analysis.
Yeah, I guess basically. I am.
And I think that's right. I love photography, and I'm an active photographer, and I actively did not choose a career in photography because I interned at a couple photo studios when I was younger, and I kept meeting people who were artists. They defined themselves as artists, photographers, and yet here they were shooting bottles of ketchup for an ad campaign.
Absolutely.
And their love. And I asked them, "Do you ever shoot for art anymore?" They said, "I either don't have the time or I don't have the energy." And so their passion became a job. I mean that pejoratively.
Yeah.
It became work.
Yeah.
And I think that's where when people say, I want to be in theater, I want to be in fashion, and I think they forget that they're just businesses.
Right.
They're just businesses. And I can tell you somebody who was passionate for fashion, who's a job in fashion, living their childhood dream, and they hate their life. And I can show you somebody who stumbled and bumbled and found themselves in manufacturing, making a widget, like they're making a screw that fits in the back of a thing that nobody ever sees, and that they're the happiest people alive.
Yeah.
In fact, I was talking to a contractor, and I asked him, just out of the blue, I was sort of making small talk. I'm like, just out of curiosity, do you like your job?
Yeah.
And he says, I love my job.
Mm.
He says, I love it. And he said it with such passion, no other word for it. And I was like, what do you love about it? He goes, I get to build things with my own hands, and I get to see them built.
Yeah.
I get to see what I built. I start with nothing. I start with a pile of wood and some nails and some sheetrock. And then when I'm done, you get that.
Right.
And then I go do it again and again and again and again, whether it's a kitchen remodeling or whatever it is. And he had such elation to see the fruits of his actual labor.
Right. What you're saying reminds me of something I've come to understand, which is there's grunt work in anything. There's boring work in anything. And so really what we have to figure out is, what is the thing we're aiming toward that has enough in it that we love, that it's worth doing all the boring parts, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm sure not every bit of his contracting work, his construction work
for sure
is enlivening, but boy, seeing what he's built lights him up, right? And he can hold on to that vision while he's pounding that umpteenth nail.
I'm having an insight here. Here's where we make a mistake. We're looking for the work to be the thing that is passionate. And it's not the work that is the thing that is passionate. It is what that work produces, right? Because raising kids, it is awful. In the early part, you don't sleep. You got, as you said, changing diapers in the middle of the night. You get peed on and thrown up on. And then they get a little older and they become teenagers and they're a pain in the ass to be around. And then one of them gets bad grades and you got to deal with that. And another one gets a fight in school and punches a kid, and then you got to deal with that. And like, where's the joy? I thought that having kids was supposed to be joyful, right? But then you have these unpredictable glimmers of your kids helping each other, or another parent saying, your kid's great, or the teacher saying, your kid helps all the other kids. You get these unexpected glimmers that make all of that worth it in an instant.
Yes.
And I know that from my work, like writing books it's the worst thing in the world.
Yeah,
I don't know why anybody, people like, I want to be an author. I'm like, don't, it's the worst.
Yeah.
But when you put something out in the world that resonates with people, it's instantly worth all of it. And I do it again.
Yeah.
Even though every time I've written a book, I've said, this is the last one.
Yeah.
And I think people are looking for the passion in the wrong place. They're looking for the passion in the labor, but they're not looking for what the labor produces. And maybe this is one of the problems with knowledge work, which is knowledge work is kind of sitting at a desk. I don't even know how you define what quote unquote labor is in a lot of knowledge work. And then what's the result of that labor? And do we appreciate the results? Like, we don't think about what the things we make, we don't think about the impact they have in the world. I'll give you an awful example. I met somebody recently who has a very niche specialty. She helps project manage the building of super yachts for the mega wealthy.
There you go.
Of course, my first question was, how the hell did you get into that? You know?
Really?
And I asked her, do your clients ever say, thank you so much, why don't you take the yacht with your family for a week? And she said, it's never happened.
Never. Right.
So I said to her, so what you're telling me is these multi-billionaires who build these yachts for many hundreds of millions of dollars that they use for 2 weeks a year, and they sail around the world just in case the family might want to use it. At no point on this empty yacht has anybody ever said to you, thanks for all your hard work, why don't you borrow the yacht? And she said, it's never happened. And I said, well, how does that make you feel? She says, it also occurs to me that, what the hell good am I doing in the world? And so, tremendous amount of labor, I'm sure incredibly well compensated, but there's no glimmer. There's no There's no, what an amazing opportunity that I have to give to my family, the opportunity to go on a mega yacht that none of us could afford, that none of us will ever have the opportunity. I'm going to take my friends that I grew up with who have middle income jobs, and I'm going to show them something and give them an experience. And that makes all of this shit worth it because
Right.
I get to give that to people that I love. And she never gets that glimmer.
Is she happy in her job?
No,
Yeah. Yeah.
no, it pays well.
Yeah. But don't you think it has to be a combination of getting there and the outcome? Because like when you talked about kids and you named, I've been through every horrible scenario and many more in raising my children. But there's also stuff along the way that is hilarious and wonderful and wacky, right? There's like stuff punctuating all the crap that is absolutely wonderfully wild and like getting to relive your own childhood is part of it for me. I got to go to all these kids movies that I would never go to. I got to be on roller coasters. I couldn't do the work that I do if it was only the outcome, because the outcomes are so far into the future, like writing a book, right? As one of my friends said, who's in publishing, he said, only write a book if it's going to move along your own thinking in some ways. Yeah. And it's true. Like I bet for you too, that it wasn't just that you were regurgitating stuff that was tried.
I was learning along the way.
Yeah.
I had insights along the way that as I'm writing, I feel electric because a new idea is pouring out of me in that moment.
Yeah. And that I bet that was part of what kept you going, not just the outcome of having it to put into the world.
What we're defining here? You know what we're defining? We're defining a purpose-driven life. Yeah. Because if you think what purpose is idealism. And idealism, by its very definition, is unrealizable, right? All men are created equal. Never going to happen. Never, ever, ever. Not in a million years.
Right.
However, it's the striving towards that. And to your point, it's the mile markers. I don't know how to define them, but like, for example, women's suffrage, civil rights, abolition of slavery. It's like, look, we're getting closer, guys. We're getting closer. Let's keep going. Right. To your point, I think if it was just awful work the whole time waiting for the final outcome, then we should absolutely quit. And I think you're right. I think it goes back to those glimmers, which is the little glimmers that say, you know what? This is worth it. I'm going to keep on this. Yeah. I'm going to keep doing this kid rearing thing and not put them up for adoption because, that was a fun family dinner last night.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think if we're talking about purpose-driven life, if we go right back to the beginning of this conversation, there's and this comes directly from your data, which is what I love, which is from a very young age, we instill in people, in our youngest generations, it is good to be an idealist. It is good to strive to contribute to something bigger than yourself. You won't know how to get there. You'll change your mind 100 times, but you have to keep your head above looking beyond the horizon. And so long as you feel like you're getting closer to the horizon, even if it's a windy, difficult road, so long as you have elements that say, no, I think you're on a good path here, you will have a happy life.
And as long as there's something nourishing along the way, there's got to be something along the way to keep me going.
Does money play any role in people's happiness according to your study?
It does. What we find is that you need to get your basic needs met in order to be happy. And that every dollar you make toward getting your basic needs met, like, food and shelter and educating your kids, like every dollar you make makes you happier. We know that. But then you buy that $100 million yacht, it doesn't really make you happier.
Yeah.
On average, like, if you took all the $100 million yacht owners, they wouldn't be happier on average than the people who basically had enough.
Who only have a $50 million yacht.
Yeah, exactly.
But comparison is relative, right? Because billionaires aren't comparing themselves to us. Mm-mm. Billionaires are comparing themselves to each other.
Absolutely.
And so this is the part of the problem, right? It's a relative scale.
Yes, because sometimes these billionaires are in great pain because they have a couple fewer billion than somebody else. I mean, it's hard to imagine, and yet I know it in my own life. Like I can compare myself on the most trivial things to other people, and then I try to pull back from that and notice what I'm doing.
Unrelated, I'm just going to say it because it's fun. Do you want to you want to understand the difference between a million and a billion?
Tell
Like
me.
when people talk about millionaires and billionaires.
Yeah.
So an easy way to understand the difference: a million seconds is 11.5 days. A billion seconds is 31.5 years.
Wow. Whoa. Yeah. Okay.
And that's the difference between being a millionaire and a billionaire.
Millionaire.
It's not even close.
Yeah. But the most valuable thing we have is time. So I like your analogy that you were talking about seconds, but those seconds are far more precious ultimately than those dollars.
And money is a redeemable commodity. We
Yeah.
spend it, we lose it, we can make more. But spending time or energy, these are non-redeemable commodities. And everyone gets the same amount. From day one,
Well, we
everybody
don't
gets
know
24
how
hours
much
in a
we
day.
get, but we don't know how much we get, right? That's the thing.
Oh, in terms of lifespan.
Yeah.
That's even more interesting. Yeah. So
But you're right. We all have 24 hours in a day.
We all have 24 hours in a day, but we don't know how many 24-hour days we get.
Exactly.
And so when we give that precious commodity to another human being, when somebody's struggling at work and we sit down with them and we give them some tough love, when your kid is struggling at school and the teacher spends an hour after school, when our friend is moving and we go to their house and we pack boxes.
Yeah.
The expense of time as a gift, I mean it as a gift.
Yeah.
Not in terms of, are you being, because I'm totally anti that you have to use all that time to be productive as well. Because I think sometimes zoning out and watching TV is the best use of that time. And so I'm not making the analogy that you have to make use of all your time. I'm talking very specifically about the value of time as a gift to another human being.
Yes.
Is more valuable than any gift on the planet.
I have a quote here from one of my Zen teachers. His name is John Tarrant, and he said, "Attention is the most basic form of love." And if you think about it, our undivided attention, it's the most valuable thing we've got to give.
Oh, the only thing we have these days is divided attention.
Yeah.
And we can't even watch TV without also checking social media and sending a text.
Absolutely. I mean, research shows we typically have 2 or 3 screens open at once.
So the only thing we have these days is divided attention, and yet the best way to express love to someone is undivided attention.
Yeah.
You're blowing my mind a little bit. I want to ask you 2 final questions.
Okay. I'm having such a good time, by the way. This is really a lovely
I can ask you another 100 then.
Okay.
How happy do money and fame actually make people?
They don't. They don't make people not happy either. Well, actually, fame may, because fame can make people intrude on your life and stuff. So fame actually might make you less happy. Money doesn't make you happier or not happier. Once you get above a certain level, you don't get much of a bump. You get some bump, but not that much. Fame is really a double-edged sword. And you might be able to say something about that because you've received a lot of public attention, and I'm sure it's not all wonderful.
I think of it as cost.
Yeah.
Right? So my goal is to spread a message and to leave this world in better shape than I found it and contribute to the lives of my friends and the people I don't know as well. And part of the cost of that is some loss of privacy, and it's worth it because the benefit so outweighs that very small cost.
Oh, can I tell you, when my TED Talk went viral, so I'm very seriously involved in Zen, and someone said you should put up a website, and I had no web presence at all. Yeah. And I said, no, I wasn't going to do that was all ego. That was all going over to the dark side. And my Zen teachers said, you have the ability to convey ideas to people that will matter to them. Don't do that. And so they pushed me toward what you're describing, which is, they said, don't stay in the shadows if you can be of use.
Yeah, that is my experience. In the early days when my work started to gain traction, I was militant about keeping my face and name off everything. Like I wanted to put my name on the book in like mouse type because the idea I never would put my picture on the cover of a book. I still won't because I'm not the thing. And I refused to have my picture on my website for years. And I wouldn't let my name be the URL because it's not about me. And then at some point I made the realization that and you're this as well, which is you actually live two versions of yourself. You are you, obviously, but you are also the representation of your message.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And how dare I selfishly deny the representation of my message? Because people don't follow ideas, they follow people. Because ideas are abstract and people are real. So we create representations of a set of values. So Martin Luther King is a representation of a set of values, and we follow Martin Luther King, but not really. We really follow the ideals that he stood for because I stand for those ideals too. They're my ideals as much as they are his, for example.
And in that sense, you're a placeholder, if you will, for a whole set of values and aspirations. Right. And that's a function that's important to serve.
Here's another question for you. What's the best thing we can do right now for our happiness?
Two things. Engage with people and engage in things you care about. So ideally, engage in things you care about with people you care about. That's the sweet spot.
Bob, what a joy.
Yeah, this was fun.
What an absolute joy. I leave elated and buzzing.
Me too, actually. This was a pleasure, an unexpected pleasure.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciate it.
Take care.
If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And if you'd like even more optimism, check out my website, simonsinek.com, for classes, videos, and more. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of each other.